welcome. And thank you for joining live and otherwise watching this on YouTube. Thank you. So the numbers are going up and up, but just let's have a brief introduction. So for this today, my name is Bart van Buchem. I'm a pain specialist physiotherapist. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I'm both working for master sessions as a course. Lorimer is teaching in June, July, and later on in the year, in the autumn, will be in the US. More specifically, if it's help me there, Los, it's September, October, in Canada and New York, not a few cities. Yeah, it's going to be busy.
San Fran. Yeah,
San Fran.
It's going to be great. Also, it's a big year. It's a big year for travel.
It's a big year for travel. And here in the UK, York will be in June 14 and 15. And there will be another course in Austria, in Vienna, which will be early July. So please welcome everyone joining from these countries and everywhere else in the world. Well, there's no need to introduce Lorimer, obviously, but I want to give you a broad idea of what we're going to discuss today. So there was a paper that came out earlier this year or late last year about teaching patients about pain. It's basically a review, and I encourage everyone to read it. We're going to talk about the skill, the thrill, and the will of pain education. And that's a quote that I picked from the paper, which is kind of nice. So we're going to talk all things about what we can do, what the critique, but also the possibilities, the challenges, and the difficulties that we have experienced in trials, but also in the clinical practice. So I think this paper really represents where we are until now and where we should go. We will definitely not be able to bring everything. So I really encourage you, if you're around in York, in Vienna, in New York, obviously, San Fran, or otherwise in Canada, I'm not sure which.
Vancouver,
to join, because this course will get you the depths of this understanding and the notion of let's move forward, I would say. So thank you lots for joining again. It's really exciting to talk about this.
Great to see you, Bart. Great to see you, and great to see a few people on. G'day, everyone.
Hello. So perhaps maybe this paper needs some introduction. As it's a really very interesting collaboration. The names, and I think the PETAL group. So maybe that needs some introduction. So I think that would be good for we're talking about right now.
Thanks, Bart. So PETAL, which originally stood for Pain Education Team of Absolute Legends, but now we've softened that a little bit to be Pain Education Team to Advanced Learning. It's an international, interdisciplinary collaboration of people who can see, I guess, have been involved in research around patient and general public facing pain education for some time, or they're actively researching in that. And I guess they share, the will to pursue better outcomes on the basis of what we know. And there's a few groups around the world who have been really active in trying to push this forward. And some time ago, I reached out to a whole bunch of people, and most of those people jumped straight in. Some of those people I reached out to did not, actually, which was really surprising to me, but sort of preferred to run their own commentary on things. And I can understand that, because as soon as you bring together a diverse group of people, all of your decisions take a lot longer, and the influence of one person is always diluted by how many people there are in the collaboration. So PETAL was formed, I want to say 18 months ago, maybe a bit longer, and Cormac Ryan from Tees was generous enough to join me in putting it together. It's funded by the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council. So I got a grant here with our Commonwealth government that supports has supported that group. And the group has been working for some time on, we've got several working groups. I guess the most active working group has been the evidence review group, and they're approaching the write-up of the first of two really big systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So Cormac is leading that working group. And we've published a paper on straight to general public pain education, where's the field at? And the one you're referring to, Bart, is around contemporary delivery principles. How do we do it, and how are we doing it at the moment? And I think it's probably fair to say that it's very different from how we were doing it 10 years ago. I mean, even sort of 5 or 6 years ago. So things have moved rapidly and in a really exciting way, and that reflects that what happens when you get a whole lot of clever people with different perspectives on something together to try and push the field forward. So I think we are pushing the field forward rapidly, and the clinical trials that our group is starting now include a different kind of education from what was in, for example, the Resolve trial, which was our most recently published big clinical trial of a treatment grounded in education. So yeah, does that summarize the PETAL group well enough?
Absolutely.
I mean, I won't go through everyone in it. They're on the paper.
They're on the paper, yes, and it's a really interesting group. And I hear you when you say, like, when people are joining, this is by being diluted by the size of the group, and because we all have our social and cultural differences as well, and how and these barriers are very nicely described here. So in this paper, but I would just want to move to the conclusion, so we can move back to the details of how did you come to the conclusion, if that's all right for you, Joe. Sure. So you're talking about that educational science, the constructivism models, learning frameworks for developing pain science education, or pain neuroscience education, or pain education in general. That's a quite new term for people, I guess. So that's a recommendation. The conclusion is that we have to move forward. We have to take on board these educational strategies. Why? And perhaps, how did you come to that conclusion?
Thanks, Bart. Well, I think the convergence of lots of different data, really. Someone I have a deep respect for called Kevin Vowles. He's a psychologist, works in the pain field, does a lot of work with ACT. He's got two great phrases, actually. One is a word, outstanding, and I've picked that up and used that forevermore, thanks to Kevin. But the other one is he talks about dancing to the data. And I really relate to this, that if the data come in telling us something, we've got to dance to that music and not hang on to our prior positions on stuff. If the data are clearly refuting what we thought, and that's what's happened. So over it's 20 years since we published the first clinical trial, which was on pain education using a real explaining model, and that become known as explaining pain, or in North America at least, pain neuroscience education, and some of Western Europe, pain neuroscience education. Pain neuroscience education was, in all the published work that I've seen, has hardly changed since those first clinical trials. And I've learnt heaps about how naive I was in interpreting some of those early clinical trials that I was involved with. And, it seemed really good. It really did seem really good. And now I think the evidence review group is including 78 randomized controlled trials on effectively pain neuroscience education, or treatments that are grounded in it. And the best data we have from a meta-analytical perspective is that as a treatment, it's good. And I hold up my fingers, it's good. If the scale was going from bad to benign, it's neither good nor bad, to good to very good to excellent, it's good. So And network meta-analyses published recently by Manuela and Paulo Ferreira's group concluded that pain education, including that sort of stuff, it's the best treatment we have for chronic low back pain, and I think you'd generalize that. The evidence suggests that the most sustainable benefits come from pain education programs. So I think the evidence is really clear that it's good, but it's not very good or excellent. And we currently have nothing that is very good or excellent for people with chronic pain, according to the evidence, right? So then we take that data and then we take a whole other chunk of data that we call real world data. And the real world data looks at, okay, so out there in real life practice, with people who are good at pain neuroscience education, what are their results like? And that we started to understand this data about 6 or 7 years ago, and those data showed quite clearly that people who were expert at explaining pain or delivering pain neuroscience education, or doing the pain talk, those sorts of things, were achieving the learning objectives about 50% of the time. That's 50% of the time we're not achieving it. So that was a little bit disappointing. But when we looked at follow-up, those people who had shifted their understanding, the learning objectives were achieved, then they did really well. Like they did superbly. So we were simultaneously disappointed and excited by the possibility of, okay, well, what if we were really good at education? And what do you do when you want to be really good at education? You stop looking at health literature. You start looking at learning literature and education literature, and they've been dealing with this forever. How do they achieve learnings in their students? And in the health field, we don't do any of that stuff. We make brochures and we give lectures to people, or we stand in front of a group of patients and tell them stuff. So we're not doing that anymore. You know, that's got its place for sure. When we do community outreach, that's really the only feasible model. And we get people up and we entertain and we get them doing role plays and all that. But there's still a big chunk of it, which is sort of quasi lecture. So why did we conclude in that paper that we need to use contemporary learning frameworks or empirically supported learning frameworks, dive into constructivism? There's lots of constructivist-based models of learning. Because it just makes sense that we should, like that is telling us we can do education better. So let's do education better and see what happens. So that's what PETAL is all about. So there are lots of research. Well, there's numerous research groups around the world now who are no longer doing the pain talk. We use the same resources, but we use theories of self-determined learning, or if anyone's familiar with the term heutagogy, I don't even know if that's how you say it, heutagogy, which is a name for self-determined learning, self-reflective or self-realized learning, these sort of things where we strategize putting the learner in charge.
So it really sounds, from a clinical perspective, it really sounds like, is that what we're already doing? Or so what will be the essence of the constructivism view compared to, let's say, the old school? And what does it mean for the clinic?
Yeah, well, I actually think a lot of clinically reasoning health professionals are constructivist in the way they're thinking. And whenever I talk about this, I have to acknowledge the font of influence of David Butler, because he's sort of always a few years ahead of everyone on this sort of stuff. And so, you know, a lot of what I've learned recently has been guided by his direction. Oh, read this person, read that person. And but I think a lot of clinically reasoning health professionals are constructivist insofar as they construct a picture of the clinical scenario, and they themselves are working out a solution to a problem by putting stuff together, by actively doing experiments in the moment on themselves as well as on their patients. From a pain education perspective, I suspect the best pain educators are already a bit constructivist without realizing it. They don't realize that's what they're doing. But I think when people are explicitly doing pain education, I think it's unlikely that they'll be adopting a constructivist approach to that. And our research would say around the world where people are doing, for example, explain pain talks or education sessions as part of programs or running community education sessions, so far our research says without exception, they are doing it pretty much like we were doing it 20 years ago, which makes sense, right? And I'm not criticizing them on there, but I'm thinking, jeepers, we've got a great opportunity here, an amazing opportunity to do it differently. So I guess we tend to take a behaviorist approach to education, that we're trying to reinforce the behaviors we want and not reinforce the behaviors we don't. When we take a constructivist approach to learning, it's a different mindset. We're really looking for opportunities to be the one holding the torch for someone, but they are choosing the direction, if that makes sense. And we strategize opportunities for them to make mistakes, to make predictions that are not reinforced. So we bring in a lot of that sort of Bayesian predictive processing stuff, error detection, all that sort of stuff. And we want them to slowly piece together models of how things are. And some of those models are how pain is, what it means for them, rather than give advice or teach people how to answer exams the right way.
So that brings to where the pain experience, for example, has been discussed. And what's the role, or where does the neuroscience bit sits here compared to the experiential bit? And I think that some of my personal work, sometimes people are not so interested in talking about neuroscience, but they do want to talk about their experience, and that makes a lot of sense. So it does feel like it's a different layer of understanding my experience rather than trying to understand my biology. How does that relate in this stage, or from this perspective, and you guys from the PETAL group?
Yeah, I think the most honest answer to that question would be I don't know, and I don't think we know yet, because we're really in a very active zone of discovering from consumers, so from patients who have recovered. We've done a lot of work in the last 10 years. We've published this work. I don't know if it was talked about in that review paper, but we've asked people who have recovered, how did you do it? And what were the most important things that you learnt along the way? So their responses to those questions, 350 or so are in that sample now, have guided a shift in the content that we focus on. They've also guided a shift in the broader messaging around that. But what we're also realizing when we ask clinicians, so we ask health professionals, what do you like about pain education? What do you think works yourself? What are you most intimidated by? And when we understand that, we construct a really interesting picture of the need for them to have an understanding of the biology. So we certainly feel like the health professional needs to get it, because not many patients there'll be enough patients who are just not satisfied. And there'll be a lot of people who can pick up that you're not very confident on this, are you? They can sort of pick that up. And there's some great experiments that have manipulated the non-verbal communication of confidence in your story and those things. So I'm probably more convinced than I was that if we want to work with people with chronic pain, we should have a contemporary understanding of how chronic pain works. And then we should have a language that is informed and guided by consumers that allows us to impart that understanding through these sort of self-determined pathways, constructivist pathways. So I think going back to the neuroscience question, I think the clinician needs to be aware, but we also, when you talk about constructing a new understanding of how things are, of the internal models of how things are, then we sort of go from this top level. Here are the core concepts, and our consumer research tells us we should call them the essential pain facts. So there are 4 essential pain facts, but nestled within them are the concepts that our consumers have told us are important for grounding that, for providing a foundation for that, providing a framework for when that might be threatened. So, for example, essential pain fact 1 says that pain protects us and promotes healing. And an obvious question from a client might be, so why do injuries hurt so much if it's there to protect us? And all of a sudden, we have to have a deeper understanding. Why do they hurt so much? And we can have an understanding of peripheral sensitization, for example. But then we have to be able to articulate peripheral sensitization in a way that is scientifically accurate and can easily be grasped. And let's say we decide to avoid the neuroscience of it. And we say, well, we know that your nerves get sensitive when there's inflammation around. We only need one person a day to say, how does that work? Or how do we know that? Or what actually happens? Or to argue the point. Well, of course they're sensitive. We're injured. So I think we have to have ourselves an understanding of, would you like to understand that more deeply, and wait for the response to that, but be ready to go on how does peripheral sensitization work. I mean, some patients are liberated when they realize that when they've injured themselves, there are molecules that help healing that change the response profile of nociceptors. They actually like to know that, and it gives them the will and therefore the thrill of understanding how they're working. I had a great conversation today about the day 5 or 6 immune-mediated spreading of pain when you hurt your back. So you have a minor back injury, and on day 5 or 6, we know there's an immune cascade that will come out somewhere there, and the pain will suddenly start to spread. So we've been asking consumers, when that happens, what do you think's going on? And the most common response will be, is it bleeding? Has it broken? It's a catastrophic interpretation. And I've experienced, great liberation for patients in suggesting to them beforehand, so somewhere around now you might find that your pain spreads, and that's because of molecules within your nervous system. And then I wait and see if they sort of lean forward and lift their eyes up, or they're clearly tuned out. But if they lean forward and invite more, then we might want to do some. You can do an experiment on that. I'm going to do an experiment on that tomorrow and understand that better. So all this sort of guiding people towards learning, I think there's a proportion of patients who are not going to be convinced by just telling people how things are, what to do. I think people, in my experience, knowing that you can go to the stage where you can explain why the things are like they are in a way that they're discovering, I think it's giving us better outcomes.
Yeah, so I think you already sort of touched on the strategies here. For example, I heard something ICAP, ICAP, so interactive, the C for constructive, the A for active, and the P for passive, which sort of, you fit them all in, right? So you introduced a one way, but you also, you introduce a philosophy or an idea or some information, but you also invited the patient to be actively, what do you think about this? Does it make any sense? Does it make you feel like bad or great or whatever? Do you want to know more? And do an experiment. So that sort of feels like there's our different layers of understanding. That's another thing in the paper, is trying to understand this ICAP model, because it seems to make it feel like we should do some, instead of taking these essential pain facts of delivered and done, like repeatedly asking if people getting it. what I also want, to what extent is the Resolve trial, for example, you mentioned it before, that it was already included, because I do feel like the imagery work is also this learning bits, because this whole motor imagery work we've produced with Neugroup before, and the GMI work just from its origin, but now using mirrors, using experiments, and using these, maybe even some of the illusions you can evoke that are part of that learning process that fits to an essential learning fact. Do I get that right? Is that what you're aiming for here?
You got it right into the last bit. We weren't aiming at that when we designed the treatment back in 2017, or when we designed graded motor imagery in 2000, first on CRPS patients. I was totally naive to this stuff, totally naive. When we planned the Resolve trial, so I have to give a shout out to Ben Wand, who did a great job in integrating different interventions that had proven to deliver a little signal in people with chronic musculoskeletal pain, and put them into a coherent progressive package. There's three pillars to the fit for purpose model that we've been sort of developing for 20 years, broadly around the idea that one pillar is people need to understand that their body is fit for purpose, or for play, or for performance. One pillar is to refine the neural networks, the internal models that represent how fit their body is for purpose. And that's where graded motor imagery comes in, and other precision training tasks. And the third pillar is to ensure that the body is fit for purpose, right? And in the middle pillar is where graded motor imagery lies. But in that treatment, in the Resolve intervention, it's all integrated. And as you've observed, Bart, the way that graded motor imagery is done is providing active, embodied experiences that help people learn the learning objectives that are the target of pillar one, of the understanding. So they're not these independent things, they're feeding off each other. And in fact, in our mediation analyses after that trial on the data, the qualitative stuff alongside the mediation analyses was telling us there was real power in this middle pillar, insofar as people were saying, oh yeah, I could see that my brain wasn't doing that properly and I could change it. Now there is what I think in a matter of time will be essential pain fact 5, is this drive for change, the bioplasticity, and patients are learning that through the middle pillar. And that's the thrill of learning.
So maybe for people watching or listening, the 5 or 4 essential pain facts, maybe we should list them for now. We don't have to go into deep, but I think that will be good to sort of, because we mentioned it a few times now.
Yeah, so the important caveat or preface to that is that there is a bucket load of research behind these essential pain facts, and that research has involved 700 or 800 consumers and 6 different clinical and research disciplines. And there's a lot of work behind it. We didn't just make them up. It's important to know. So the 4 essential pain facts. Number 1 is that pain protects us and promotes healing. Number 2 is that persisting pain overprotects us and prevents recovery. Number 3 is many factors influence pain. And number 4 is, almost with a preface of therefore, there are many ways to change pain and gradually retrain this overprotective system. So the essential pain fact is, therefore, there are many ways to reduce pain and gradually recover. But I guess the mechanism of that recovery is to reduce pain system hypersensitivity over time. And what I think will become the 5th essential pain fact, if the data are suggesting this, is that we are bioplastic. That is a fundamental part of us. And I've been talking recently with the people doing our local pain educator training program here in Australia. So Pain Revolution runs a 2-year program to train rural healthcare professionals. in pain science, education and care. And we've been talking there about instilling a recovery mindset in us as health professionals, but also in patients. And it's not a resilience mindset; it's a recovery mindset. And I really like that idea to always be aware that, okay, I can change. How can I change in this opportunity in the right way? Change is going to happen. Can I guide it?
Yeah, that makes total sense. But it's challenging, like you said, and you have been there for a decade or two implementing this. So
Yeah.
these essential pain facts, also, if that are the broad messaging, the message that have to come across by constructivism. I'm just losing my language here. Constructivism manner. Could you give an example of how that might look like on that pain protects and promotes healing, for example? How that would look like?
Yeah, sure. So if we to employ, for example, the ICAP framework, so that's Mickey Chee's framework developed for teaching high school students things. Lots of data behind it. There's other constructivist approaches that the PETAL team works with, but that's the one I'm most familiar with. So ICAP is written backwards. So the first step is passive. And that might be simply saying to people, pain protects us and promotes healing, and being a bit didactic. And then we might want to do something active. And it might simply be, do you want to do an experiment? And I do this when I do courses. Squeeze your ear until it hurts, let it go. Why did you stop squeezing? Because it hurt. So what was pain doing? No, it was protecting me. Those sort of examples. It might then be constructive. We might go to another level or we might look for the person who says, but how does it promote healing? What have you ever twisted your ankle? What happened the next day? Could you stand on it? So this would take longer than I'm demonstrating now. Show me what happens the day after an ankle sprain, and they'll reenact it. So they're actively involved in the process. And I might say, so why did you stop there? Because it hurt. So you've not got any tension on the ligament that you damaged. Yeah, but it hurts. So we start that process of questioning, so why might it? So can you reenact what would happen there? So they're actively involved in it. Then the next phrase is constructive. So we might start to suggest, so how can you put those two things together? Or how might you explain that to someone else? Does your husband understand what's going on with it? How would you explain it to him? So we're not only active, they're starting to construct a story. And we might go on to something else that we haven't talked about. What about sunburn? Well, let's problem solve. Why does sunburn hurt in the shower? And it's tempting for us as health professionals to answer that question. But sit back. Why might it? And then the last one is, I like to call it inventive. I think officially it's interactive, but I like inventive, where people start inventing ways to test their knowledge and to test their capacity to articulate it to someone else or their fridge, or have a debate or problem solve together with someone. That might be an example of taking a really simple essential pain fact through the ICAP framework. And all along the way, we're just checking that we're landing this stuff. Not with, do you understand? Do you get it? Not with those sort of things, but tell me what you've got so far. That's a more active, self-reflective question.
So the last conclusion that is in the paper is basically saying that a shout out to clinicians. Oh, guys, you have to learn about this stuff. You have to get skill set for this. If we just do have like a briefly with the left, like got 10 minutes left, and I think it would be very worthwhile to see. So what is the skill set from a clinician point of view that we should start moving towards? Because educational sciences and skill set like didactics is not necessarily where it's not like the basic training for a physiotherapist or a doctor or a nurse or a PT or a psychologist even. Although I do believe that people with a didactic background will have a little bit of a benefit there. That will be moving very well. So what would be the core skill set you feel? What's the easy wins and as the paper says, the easy mistakes to prevent, where you can start on from?
Yeah, I totally agree, Bart, that health professionals, we shouldn't be expected to now also have education degrees. I totally get that. And I've got a fundamental conflict of interest in being the lead author on a paper that suggests that, right? Because it's important to me, right? I have to make that really clear, and I will benefit, right? I've got conflicts of interest here, and people will pay to come to master sessions, and if someone buys a book I wrote, they'll get a royalty. So I want to make that really clear. But in the spirit of your question, I think that we can consider becoming better health educators. So it's not only about pain, but better at the educational component of what we do, which is a massive component of what we do. And we're really good at education around motor control. We get people to feel things. Put your finger on that. Can you feel that? Can you feel that turns on slower than that, or whatever, right? We do that stuff. So we can adapt that towards understanding how pain works. But there are some, as we start that journey, I think that a good place to start is learn some skills of learning, re-engage with how it is that we learn things, even think about ICAP, think about how you could use that to learn how to help others learn a bit more. But there are some more simple things that we can start doing now. For example, this idea of the will, the skill, and the thrill. And we can be mindful of the will, the skill, and the thrill of learning stuff. The will is, and this is where I think health professionals could do way better. And I've got to give a shout out to Flip and Pain over there in the UK, because they have taken on this really at the leading edge within the health space in the UK to say, let's create a bit of will to learn. Let's put it out there as an important thing to do. And I think as health professionals, we should be more serious about that. And we can do that with messaging around the clinic, posters, getting it into our conversation. How well do you think how well do you understand your situation? Why? Oh, because how you understand it is a big part of how you're going to recover. So we're already sort of promoting the will to learn, and public messaging campaigns are critical for that. And just to say again, shout out to Flip and Pain. In Australia, Pain Revolution, I think, is the leading edge of that. The skill is something that we need to learn a little bit more about, the strategies. How do we teach people the skills of learning? And there are little tricks. For example, the idea of focused and diffuse thinking, and reminding people to put in effort. Just put in effort for a couple of minutes now. Just work really hard to think, why might blah, blah, blah happen? And if you see them going off, remind them, put in the effort now, and then give them a break and just let your mind wander for a bit. And we know that's a learning skill. Timing yourself for those periods is a learning skill. Repeating things word for word is a learning skill. Recalling things is a learning skill. Comparing and contrasting two viewpoints, they're all skills. And we can easily integrate that into our clinical work, even after the first session. So, but you've got a lot more range in your neck now than when you arrived here for this appointment for your neck pain. Compare how you were thinking about your neck when you came into how you're thinking about your neck now for me. Any differences? Any similarities? They're skills of learning. And the thrill is to encourage people to reflect on the benefits of their learning, to see how much they've moved and to see how that is practically applicable. We do that in a kind of way with manual therapy techniques. And we give people the thrill of doubling their range of motion after they've done some, or we've done some maneuver. So it's a type of learning that we've instilled, and they get the thrill of immediate change. And there's a good argument for us to be helping people observe the changes and get a thrill for what this offers them. So, will, skill, and thrill of learning. Easy mistakes. I think the easy mistakes, or I guess the mistakes that I make, and I've made a lot, to fall back on your own knowledge when things are not going well. Just keep plowing information at them. To take responsibility for their learning. It's not, in my view, it's not my responsibility. It's their responsibility. And my job is to give them the will and the skill and the thrill to learn their learning objectives, and to forget what it is we want people to learn. So, you know, we identify what that is, and it might be a bit bespoke, but there are really consistent themes, and Pain Revolution and our work has been leading that around the 4 essential pain facts, soon to be 5, but also what's underneath that. So we've got the 9 or 10 target concepts, consumer derived. So they're really consistently important. So clinicians can get better at little study plans for the week. And once they've done a couple of times, it becomes much easier. Anyway, and on the courses, I have a conflict of interest, obviously, here, but on the courses, we'll talk a bit more about those practical strategies and embodied experiences, maybe using VR or using the resources that we've got, and doing things like salad, which is mentioned in the paper, rather than just go and read this. Salad it.
SALAD. Sure.
Correct.
Let's have a look. We will share the paper so you can have a look. I think it's a great paper because it's easy to read if you just want to get introduced by these paradigms, and the references also allow you to do like a deeper dive if you want. Just a big shout out to Flip and Pain, as they are also accompanied here in this webinar. So thank you for joining, everyone. Connect Health, and we're looking forward to meet you in York, obviously, because that will be a massive opportunity again. And whilst you in York in June, that will be a lovely way of re-engaging and getting all these great people together. So thank you for joining, guys. Just a little notion of background here. So we're gonna share this paper with you through the email you will receive afterwards with the link to the recording, and therefore you will be able to access the full paper and have a read. Secondly, we will also give you the dates when and where Los is going to teach his course in June, July, and September, October, later year in the US. So if you have any questions, please email us. I think that was very helpful to get some ideas for this paper, but also for the your interest here. So we want to follow up on. Just for now, we're gonna finish this webinar, Los. Anything you want to add that I missed here?
Oh, no, I always get a bit self-conscious because I'm so excited about this stuff at the moment, Bart. And you know, we're just about to embark on a massive public messaging campaign funded by our Commonwealth government. Big 4 or 5 year project here with millions of dollars. And the reason that's been funded is because now the case for education is so compelling, but the need for us to do it better is equally compelling.
Totally. And I'm massively biased with my background at Neuroscience Group. A big shout out to neurogroup.com as well. If you're interested in the course in the US, please go to neurogroup.com. You will find more information about dates and locations over there. It will be a very similar course. And we're looking forward to see you live, Los. That will be really exciting.
It'll be fun. Yeah, I can't wait.
For sure. All right. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Hopefully catching up another time. It was lovely to have you all here around in big groups again. So thank you. and see you guys.
Thanks, Bart. Thanks, everyone. Been a pleasure.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao.